Today, my friends, we are going to read A Sweet Passover by Leslie Newman and illustrated by David Slonim. Miriam loved celebrating Passover at Grandma and Grandpa's house. She loved pinning a piece of lace to her hair, just like Grandma. And then she lit 2 tall candles and sang a special bracha to start off the Seder. She loved walking around the table with a towel draped over her arm while Mommy poured water from a white pitcher over everybody's hands. Remember, that's orchatz. We say a bracha we wash our hands without saying the bracha. She joyfully sang the 4 questions in Hebrew and then listened as Grandpa read the answers from the Haggadah and told the story of the Jews leaving Mitzrayim, his deep, booming voice. She giggled at the way Daddy said, "Warm, warmer, hot," as she got closer and closer to finding the afikomen that he had hidden after he broke the middle matzah in half and tucked one of the pieces between 2 of Grandma's cookbooks high on a kitchen shelf. She happily stood beside Aunt Rachel and Uncle Nathan when they opened the front door to welcome Eliyahu Hanavi, and she laughed when Bubala joined them and howled at the full moon. Miriam loved everything about Pesach, but most of all, she loved eating matzah. During the 8-day festival, she ate as much of the unleavened bread as she could. On the first day of Pesach, Miriam and Grandma ate matzah with butter. On the second day of Pesach, Miriam and Grandpa ate matzah with jelly. On the third day of Pesach, Miriam and Aunt Rachel ate matzah with tuna salad. On the 4th day of Pesach, Miriam and Uncle Nathan ate matzah with egg salad. On the 5th day of Pesach, Miriam and Mommy ate matzah with cream cheese. On the 6th day of Pesach, Miriam and Daddy ate matzah with cottage cheese. On the 7th day of Pesach, my friends, Miriam ate lots of matzah by herself. She ate matzah with almond butter and matzah with apple butter. She ate matzah with blueberry jam and matzah with strawberry jam. She ate plain matzah, egg matzah, whole wheat matzah, and chocolate-covered matzah. All week long, Miriam ate nothing but matzah, matzah, matzah. When she woke up the last day of Pesach, Miriam was sick of matzah. All she wanted for breakfast was a thick slice of warm toast or a soft, chewy bagel or a sweet cinnamon donut or a freshly baked blueberry muffin. But Pesach wasn't over until sundown, which meant that Miriam had to wait all day long before she could eat any of those things. "Miriam," Grandpa called from downstairs. "Time for breakfast." Miriam groaned and pulled the blankets over her head. "Miriam," Grandpa called again. "I'm not hungry," Miriam called back. "Are you sure?" Grandpa asked. "I'm making French toast." "I'm coming!" Miriam jumped out of bed, dressed herself, and ran downstairs. And there was Grandpa with an apron tied around his waist and a puffy chef's hat perched on his head. "Good morning, Shana maiden." Grandpa gave Miriam a hug and a kiss on the kepi. "Ready for some French toast?" Miriam looked at the counter where Grandpa had placed eggs, milk, butter, and a frying pan. "Where's the bread?" she asked. "Bread? I can't use bread. It's still Passover," Grandpa reminded her. "That's why I'm using matzah." "Matzah?" Miriam moaned. "How can you make French toast with matzah?" "I'm making Passover French toast," Grandpa explained. "I'm making matzah brie." "Matzah brie? Yuck!" Miriam folded her arms. "I'm never eating matzah again." "Never? That's too bad," Grandpa said. "You don't know what you're missing." And then he began to cook. First, Grandpa crumbled up the matzah and soaked it in warm water. Next, he cracked some eggs into a bowl, added a little milk, and beat the mixture with a fork. Then he drained the matzah and poured the beaten eggs and milk over it. Finally, Grandma sliced butter into a great big frying pan. As soon as the butter began to sizzle, he poured in the uncooked matzah brie. When it was brown at the edges, Grandpa slipped his hands into a pair of oven mitts, placed a large plate on top of the frying pan, and flipped the whole thing over. "Ta-da!" crowed Grandpa. "Pesach French toast. Doesn't that look delicious?" "No," said Miriam, wrinkling her nose. "No more matzah for me." "Suit yourself." Grandpa slid the matzah brie back into the pan to cook the other side. "Will you please set the table?" Miriam took out the special Pesach plates and put one at each place. Just as she set down the last fork and spoon, Mommy and Daddy and Aunt Rachel and Uncle Nathan and Grandma scrambled into the dining room. Mommy spooned applesauce on top of her matzah brie. Daddy poured maple syrup on his piece. Aunt Rachel sprinkled her serving with sugar and cinnamon. Uncle Nathan smothered his slice with sour cream. Grandma added salt and pepper to her matzah brie, and Grandpa left his plain. "May I please have seconds?" asked Uncle Nathan. "Save another piece for me," said Aunt Rachel. "My compliments to the chef," said Daddy. They were so busy eating that they did not even notice that Miriam had nothing on her plate. Soon breakfast was over and all was quiet until Miriam's belly let out a long, loud rumble. "Miriam, didn't you get enough to eat?" asked Mommy. "No," Miriam answered. "Miriam is never eating matzah again," Grandpa announced to everyone. Mommy and Daddy and Aunt Rachel and Uncle Nathan and Grandma all gasped. "Never? Not even on Pesach?" asked Mommy. "But Miriam, we always eat matzah on Pesach. How else will we remember that our ancestors were slaves in Mitzrayim, and when Paro granted them freedom, they had to leave in such a hurry they couldn't even wait for the bread dough to rise? How else will we remember that even the plainest food eaten in freedom tastes sweeter than the fanciest food eaten in slavery? That's why we say, have a Zisson Pesach, Grandma told Miriam. Have a sweet Passover. Matzah is such a simple food, it reminds us to be humble, explained Uncle Nathan. It doesn't puff itself up, and we shouldn't puff ourselves up either. It's a mitzvah to eat matzah, Aunt Rachel added, a good deed. And just as the matzah was baked in a hurry, we should always be in a hurry to do a good deed whenever we can. Matzah goes with everything, Grandpa said, and that reminds us that we should get along with everyone too. And if all those reasons weren't enough for us, Dayenu, Grandma said, your grandfather happens to make the best matzah brie in the world. Miriam looked around the table at each member of her family and thought over what everyone had said. Then she asked her most humble question, "Grandpa, will you please make me a matzah brie?" "I'm sorry, Miriam," said Grandpa, patting his big round belly. "I'm too full to cook." "Please, Grandpa," said Miriam. "Pretty please, with applesauce on top." "No, I'm not going to make you a matzah brie." "Why not?" asked Miriam. "Because," Grandpa said, handing her an apron and puffy hat, "we're going to make matzah brie together." Miriam crumbled up the matzah and beat the eggs while Grandpa melted butter in the frying pan. Miriam poured the uncooked matzah brie into the pan and watched as Grandpa fried it up. When the matzah brie was ready, Grandpa set a great big piece in front of Miriam. "Essen in gesund, schöne Mädela," he said. "Eat in good health and enjoy." And Miriam did. The